You know, when we think about the final days of Jesus, our minds usually jump straight to the suffering, the betrayal. But if you dig into the source material, you find there's something so much deeper going on. The story isn't just about what happened, but where it all went down. Each place wasn't just some random backdrop, it was a deliberate stop on a journey, and every single one had a profound meaning.
So why does any of this matter? I mean, why get hung up on the geography? Well, because these locations, they're not just settings in a play. They're like silent witnesses to this carefully laid out path, a path that takes us from private honor all the way to public execution. And seeing the journey through its places, well, it changes how you understand the entire story.
All right, so here's a quick roadmap of where we're going. We're going to follow this timeline, starting in the quiet little village of Bethany, then moving right into the center of the conflict in Jerusalem, through that final night of surrender, and finally to the cross at Golgotha. You'll see how each stop just builds on the last one.
So, the whole final week kicks off with this really powerful contrast. It doesn't start in the chaos of the city. No, it begins in the intimacy of a home, right before it explodes into a very public and, as we'll see, a very misunderstood declaration.
Picture this. It's 6 days before his death, and Jesus is in Bethany. He's in the home of his friends, Mary, Martha, and Lazarus. And here, he isn't a threat, he's a beloved friend. Mary anoints his feet with this incredibly expensive perfume, and Jesus immediately tells everyone what it means. This is for my burial. Right there, Bethany becomes the very first place where his death is openly talked about and even honored.
And this slide just lays it out so clearly, right? You've got these two completely different worlds Jesus is moving between. In Bethany, it's all about acceptance and love. But just a few miles down the road in Jerusalem, the vibe is totally different. That's the city of conspiracy and fear, where he's seen as a direct threat to the entire system.
So he leaves the safety of Bethany and starts making his way to Jerusalem. And this ride into the city is anything but casual. He gives these super specific instructions to get a donkey that has never been ridden, which in Jewish culture was a huge sign that it was for sacred purpose. This is deliberate public political theater, a living prophecy where he declares himself as the humble messianic king.
And the crowd, oh, they go absolutely wild. They're shouting Hosanna, which basically means save us now. They're throwing their cloaks on the ground, waving palm branches. These are all gestures you save for a conquering king. But here's the tragic irony. They're right that he's a king, but they're completely wrong about what kind of king. They want a revolutionary to kick out the Romans, and Jesus, knowing they're about to turn on him, actually weeps over the city because they just don't get it.
All right, so he's in the city. The quiet, private ministry stuff is over. Now the conflict is out in the open, it's public, and it's about to become irreversible. It all comes to a head with a direct confrontation at the very heart of Jewish life.
Okay, we really have to get our heads around what the temple was. This was not just some big, fancy church. It was the absolute epicenter of the entire nation. It was their connection to God, their national identity, and the center of a massive economic machine run by the religious elite. To challenge the temple, well, you are challenging everything.
And that's exactly what Jesus does. He walks in and starts flipping over the tables of the money changers and merchants. And let's be clear, he wasn't mad about the idea of sacrifice. He was attacking the corrupt system that had turned a house of prayer into a business. This was a direct shot at the leadership's spiritual authority, right on their home turf.
And then, as if that wasn't enough, he delivers the knockout punch. He announces that the temple itself would be destroyed. To his audience, this was just unthinkable. He was basically saying that God wasn't confined to their building and that this whole corrupt system was facing judgment. And that, right there, sealed his fate. Getting rid of him was no longer just an idea. For the leadership, it was now a strategic necessity.
As we move into the final night, the whole vibe just changes. The public shouting matches give way to these intimate moments of teaching, an intense personal struggle, and the quiet before the storm of betrayal and arrest.
They're in an upper room, celebrating the Passover meal, and Jesus just hijacks the whole thing, but in the most profound way possible.
He takes these ancient symbols and gives them a brand new meaning. The bread is no longer just about the escape from Egypt. He says, "This is my body." The wine isn't just a symbol of the old promise. "This is my blood," sealing a new covenant. He is literally creating the foundation for a whole new relationship with God right before he dies.
From that upper room, he takes his disciples to a garden called Gethsemane. Now, the name itself is just chillingly perfect. Gethsemane literally means oil press, a place where olives were put under immense pressure to be crushed. The location itself is this perfect, haunting metaphor for the crushing agony Jesus is about to go through.
And it's here, in this overwhelming anguish, that he prays. And this prayer, this is the absolute turning point of the entire story. "Not my will, but yours be done." In that single moment of surrender, the cross stops being something that's just happening to him and becomes a conscious choice that he is making. The decision made right here in the garden is what will be carried out just hours later. And you just feel how utterly alone he is in this moment. While he is praying so hard that he's sweating blood, which is a real medical thing that can happen under extreme stress, his closest friends, the ones he asked to stay with him, they just fall asleep. They fail him. But the plan moves forward anyway, carried on his shoulders alone.
So after he's arrested in the garden, he's no longer a free man. He's a prisoner, and he gets shuttled between the religious and political powers of the day on this rapid, unjust conveyor belt heading straight for execution.
He's put through this sham two-part trial, both designed for one outcome: death. First up is the religious trial at the high priest's house. The charge? Blasphemy. But the Jewish council didn't have the power to execute anyone. So they drag him to the Roman governor, Pontius Pilate, and here they cleverly switch the charge to one the Romans would care about: treason. It's not about God anymore. Now it's about Caesar. He's claiming to be a rival king.
Now Pilate's no fool. He can see this is all a setup, so he tries to get out of it by offering the crowd a choice: release Jesus, who he openly says is innocent, or release a violent revolutionary named Barabbas. The crowd's choice is just stark. Whipped into a frenzy by the leadership, they scream for the rebel. And Pilate, afraid of a riot, just caves to the pressure and condemns an innocent man to die. Which brings us to the final stop on this journey: Golgotha, the place of the skull. Now this spot was intentionally located right outside the city walls, next to a main road. Rome did this for a reason. Executions were meant to be public theater, a brutal, bloody warning to anyone else who might think about challenging their authority.
But then Pilate orders a sign to be nailed to the cross, and the irony is just off the charts. It reads, "Jesus of Nazareth, King of the Jews." And he has it written in Hebrew, Latin, and Greek, the languages of religion, law, and culture. The Roman Empire, in the very act of executing him, ends up accidentally broadcasting his true identity to the entire known world.
And in the final moments, the source material records these three incredible, almost cosmic events. First, the sky goes dark in the middle of the day. Second, Jesus doesn't just die, he consciously gives up his spirit. And at that exact same moment, the massive, thick curtain in the Jerusalem temple, the one that separated the holiest place from everyday people, is torn in two from top to bottom. The message could not be clearer. The barrier is gone. Access to God is now open to everyone.
So when you look back at the whole thing, from that quiet moment of honor in Bethany to the public horror of Golgotha, you can see it, right? It wasn't a random series of tragic events. It was a journey. Which leaves us with a pretty big question. What does this intentional path, chosen at every single turn, truly reveal about the very nature of sacrifice?